At the height of the Cold War, the Bay of Pigs became famous for America's failed invasion of Cuba in 1961. Fidel Castro defended the island and became a national hero. Few know that the communist revolutionary defended Cuba's crocodiles, too. Just 15 miles from the bay, Zapata Swamp is the focal point of conservation for Cuba's native crocs. But 60 years later, the rare creatures are threatened by another assault. Almost all Cuban crocodiles that remain in the wild are found exclusively within the swamp.
We're going to try to capture a few specimens to learn a bit more about the Cuban crocodile population, which we have here in the Zapata Swamp. It was Toby who began this study back in the 70s, 40 years ago.
This is the only place in the world where they can be found living in the wild. They're nowhere else.
Have you got it? Oh, he's tough. We got you.
There are only about 3,000 wild individuals left. They have the smallest range of any crocodile in the world. 90% of the species has disappeared within the last century, mostly due to poaching.
20 centimeters. I've taken off a bit of its tail. With this sample, we're going to try to better understand the genetic identity of this group of crocodiles in the swamp.
This reptile looks like a Cuban crocodile and behaves like one. But the researchers are worried that it's a hybrid. Once common in Florida, American crocodiles are increasingly rare in the USA. But they love Cuba. They also love to mate with the extremely endangered native species.
That's one of the questions we're trying to answer. Hybridization. If the process is long-standing or recent. Hybridization is the main threat facing the Cuban crocodile. It's in danger of losing its genetic identity.
The Zapata Swamp is the largest wetland in the Caribbean. And its mangroves and endemic species thrive in the brackish water. Saltier stretches that reach from the sea into the swamp are the domain of the larger, beefier American crocodile. Cuban crocs are smaller and more aggressive. Despite their differences, the two species are meeting with increasing frequency. Between the sea and the swamp are a labyrinth of underground caves called cenotes. Freshwater and seawater mix within the caves, forming what the Cubans call halocinas. This is where the Cuban and American crocodiles meet, and where hybridization begins. In the wild, nothing can stop the two species from meeting and mating.
For me, the Cuban is the more beautiful of the two. You think differently?
No.
The Cuban crocodile is a symbol of national pride. When Castro came into power in 1959, he put together an unusual army nicknamed the Crocodileros. All of them had been crocodile poachers, and now were tasked with saving the reptiles, not killing them. Thousands of Cuban crocs were taken from the swamp and moved to a closed sanctuary, where they could reproduce without the threat of hybridization. Half a century later, Fidel Castro's Crocodile project continues, shepherded by descendants of the former poachers.
This sanctuary is extremely important for the preservation and survival of the Cuban crocodile. All the animals who are here constitute a sort of guarantee should the species disappear from the wild. These are all viable candidates for reintroduction.
There are a few American crocodiles here too, kept separate from the Cuban species. Because it's impossible to do a genetic analysis of every wild crocodile, researchers must learn to tell the difference visually.
Look at the difference. These two crocodiles are about the same size. They must be about 2 years old. The first difference you notice is the color. The American is darker, grayer. The other clue, which can help you to differentiate between an American and a Cuban, is the shape of the head. If you look at the area between the eyes and the nose, you can make out a diamond shape. However, with the American, there is no such shape between the eye sockets and the nose. That's the principal difference between them.
Crocodiles may appear slow and sluggish, but that's because they save their energy to dispatch prey or to battle for territory and mates. Late spring is mating season, and tension grows between males.
The other source of tension is when females reply to the call of a male. It's the male who chooses the female he wants. And if he chooses the female of someone else on his territory, the two males may fight it out. It can also happen that females fight over the same male. Look, they're beginning to mate. You can see the male on top. He's moving the muscles between his ribs. That makes ripples on the water, which we call the love dance.
Between 3 and 4 weeks after mating, females are ready to deposit their now fertile eggs. The females build a raised nest in case the water level goes up. If the eggs become too humid, the embryos can die. The egg is always at the top of the nest so that they're warmed from the first rays of the morning. A Cuban female will lay around 30 eggs per season, but in the wild, only one will make it to adulthood. Life expectancy in the sanctuary is much higher.
There's no other crocodile species in the world with so little territory at its disposal. We're talking about barely 100 square kilometers. No other species has such a reduced territory, and that makes it vulnerable. Its territory is so small that if there was the slightest problem, its space could be destroyed, causing it to disappear.
Today, there are more Cuban crocodiles in captivity than in the wild. ATM heads a program for introducing sanctuary crocodiles back into the swamp. But the crocodilleros aren't under any illusions that they'll only mate with their own kind. While young Cubans will continue to protect the species' identity, some things are beyond our control. Eventually, the growing number of hybrids will become a brand new species,